Ready to rock?
All right, take it, Jesse.
Please join me in welcoming Jesse.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? All right, good. So, my name is Jesse MacArthur. I grew up in Brainerd. This is where my journey began, is right here in this school, where I studied Spanish and really got into learning about Latin America. So, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, if you heard it all about what I'm going to be speaking about with being out in the Amazon, how I got in the Amazon. So it really began with a desire to help the indigenous people and having a fascination for the jungle. So this book right over there that I have posted is one that I found in a book sale at the library. I picked it up and I started reading it, and it's about this boy from New York who had the same desire that I've always had my whole life in working with the Amazon. And so I read this, and he talks about his journey of taking off and going into the jungle. And as I went through this book, it really had a huge impact on me. And I thought, okay, I'm 27 years old. I got to do this. I got to make this happen. And so I started looking for opportunities, and I found out about Sept. Sept is an organization that works with the indigenous in the Amazon, both the uncontacted tribes and the communities that they already have contact with the Western world. And so this is Parque Sierra del Divisor. This is how I found out about them. I read about this article about all they were doing with the indigenous communities, and so I wrote to them. I told them, hey, I have an anthropology background. I'm fluent in Spanish. I've done a lot of work with photography and videography. How can I help? So I sent this to the executive director, and maybe a week later he emailed me back and said, okay, send me your resume. And then before I knew it, I was on a plane heading out to the jungle. I literally dropped what I was doing, packed a bag, and I left. So what are some of the major problems that exist in the Amazon? Well, a lot of hold on, I'm going to try and get this mic going so I can speak a little bit. Okay. Can you still hear me? Okay, good. So a lot of the ones that are very well known are the illegal logging and the illegal mining. They're both huge problems, and with the illegal mining, I had no idea that it is as severe as it is. And it's not just the act of searching for gold or searching for exotic minerals in the rivers. During the process of doing this, they dump all of their waste into the river, which that includes the mercury that they use through the process. And so the people that live out in the jungle, they drink this water. The water is their source for everything. And so they get mercury poisoning. And then there's people getting cancer and having birth defects. And the Amazon is a huge network of river systems. It's not just one, but there's tiny little streams that are all the way in Bolivia or in Colombia or Ecuador, and they flow all the way to Brazil. So this mercury goes everywhere. And then there's a lot of poaching and the exploitation of plants and animals. And there's also a lot of drug production and trafficking as well, which is a major issue. So how do you protect the Amazon? Well, this is what Sadia did. They've been working with, over the course of, I believe, 35 years, more than 300 indigenous communities, where the first thing that they do is they establish contact with these people. And so, speaking with my boss when I was down there, they started this out by taking off and walking into the jungle, or taking off and going on a boat. And they traveled for almost a year, talking with these communities and saying, hey, we want to help you, we want to work with you, we want to get all of you together so we can protect ourselves and protect our way of life. And so one of the biggest things they do is they practice land titling. So after establishing a foundation with these people, they help them working with the Ministry of Agriculture in Peru to help these people get their land titled. So that way, when there are businesses that come out, people who want to log, people that want to mine. They can't just go out and say, well, look at this land here. Nobody lives there. I can do whatever I want. Because all the land that is in Peru that isn't, that doesn't belong to the communities belongs to the government. So it's kind of a free-for-all. And there's also very little law out there. Police aren't going to be able to go out there and patrol these rivers when it's 2.5 days by boat away from the nearest city. So at the very least, these people can say, hey, look, I have this document. This is our land. You need to leave. So that is the first thing that they do. Secondly, they develop planes de vida. These are life plans that they establish for the communities. And so you would think that being out in the Amazon, these people have all that they need. That is true. They have a lot of what they need. However, if their child is bit by a snake or wants to go to college, whatever it may be, it's really nice having that as an option, to have that the medication, or to have the anti-venom, or to be able to send their kid to school to try and better their life. So they want to work. And so, unfortunately, as a result, there's not a lot of education out there. So these people, a lot of the indigenous help contribute to the exploitation of the jungle. They chop down the trees. They use whatever means that they have to try and make money. And so that's what Sadia does. They try and develop these plans for the people so they can use it as an alternative. So if they are going to practice logging, they're going to practice selective harvesting. So that way they have like over a 20-year plan. They'll take trees of a certain diameter, certain dimension, a certain species of tree from different points of the jungle. So by the time after 20 years rolls around, those trees that they originally cut down, they'll be back up. There'll be new trees. And they also do fish farming, so they're not taking so many fish from the rivers. Selective harvesting, ecotourism, that's a big one they're working with now. Trying to help get people interested in other parts of the world about the Amazon. Say, like, there are macaws here. You can come and see them. You can see the jaguars. You can come out and you can see the caiman that are basking on the shores of the river. This is all here. You just need to come out and you need to learn about it. So that's been in the works for a while now. And the biggest one is maintaining a strong relationship with the people. So Sadia is constantly going into the jungle and spending time with these communities to maintain a healthy bond. So, okay. Okay, so the first city that I went to was Pucallpa. Pucallpa is the capital of the province that I first traveled to. It's very interesting because it is in the depths of the jungle. However, it's a huge, thriving city. And so there's a lot of mixture between the indigenous beliefs and the lifestyle that exists in the jungle with modernity. So, and it's also located on the Ucayali River, which is one of the main rivers that flows into the Amazon. So I put together this video that I want to show you of Pucallpa. That's how people travel to get down here. And they might go that month and a half, 2 years ago. El Rio Abuhao. That is the second river that I traveled on, and this was my first good-sized trip. I was gone for about 7 days. Um, we traveled to San Mateo, which is roughly 10 hours by boat. It's located near the Peruvian and Brazilian border. And one of the first things that I saw as soon as I got on the river were the river dolphins. And all of my life, that's something that I've always wanted to see. It just blew my mind that you could be on fresh water and you see these dolphins coming up and surfacing for air and then disappearing into the depths. And the more and more that we traveled, I started seeing them everywhere. um, some of the dangers of the river, which I didn't really know what I was getting myself into when I took off and went out there, but having a good river guide is essential. There is so much deadfall in these rivers, and the water level changes so drastically from time to time that there will be trees that are as wide as a car, and they'll be broken and snapped and jagged and sticking up out of the water. And so when you're traveling, if your guide doesn't know what's going on, you can hit these. Your boat could flip over, it could snap in half, and, well, yeah, as many of you know, the rivers are dangerous in the jungle. There's piranha, there's stingray, there's caiman that get 20 feet long, there's electric eel, there's all kinds of stuff that can really mess up your day. So, um, fortunately, our guide, we did have a good guide, and so we traveled, and we continued going deeper and deeper into the jungle. Um, I didn't know a whole lot about the illegal trafficking of the drugs and all the processing that takes place out there. But as I was saying, there's no law in the jungle. So there's people that are producing cocaine all over the place out there, and they're traveling, transporting this everywhere. And also, I didn't understand this at first, but it made sense as I went further out there. There was this one time we were passing a boat, um, and I saw this man and this boy, and as we passed them, this man pulled out a rifle, and I started freaking out, and I told my boss, and he said, "Oh, it's a rifle? Oh, it's fine. Everyone has a rifle. Like, if they have a pistol, that's a little different, but you have to have a rifle out there. Not just for, I mean, you'd assume that it'd be from people maybe trying to rob you, but it's also the animals. And you need to be able, the people out there, all the food that they get, that they're able to catch, that's what they eat. So if they don't go out and look for a deer or a wild boar, they're not going to have any food to feed their family. And they might go after them with spears, they might set traps, or they will take the rifle. And let's see. This is where I traveled with the Ministry of Agriculture, and we were plotting out property lines and taking soil samples. And we also spoke with several communities about the possibility of working together. And this truly was my orientation to the jungle. I came from Minnesota thinking, you know what, I got this. I grew up out in the country. Yeah, I'll be fine. I wasn't fine. I mean, I came back okay, but there's a lot that I went through that was difficult. Um, I'll show you this video in a minute, but just one story that I had after we got to San Mateo. We went out with the Ministry of Agriculture, and we were taking these soil samples. I was walking through the jungle, and I took a moment and just put my hand on a tree. And immediately, it felt like someone had lit my arm on fire. And I look, and there are ants swarming my arm. And I look at the men that I was traveling with, and they just burst out laughing. They look at me like, you shouldn't have put your hand on that tree, dummy. Like, there's things that live in the trees that you can't see. There's things on the ground that you can't see. And it was a bit of an eye-opening experience for me. Not just with that, but also with like food. Uh, Here we're so blessed to have access to go to the grocery store, to have fresh water, to have everything that we have. The people out there, they don't have that. Like I had said, if they want to eat, they have to go catch it. And they are responsible for the lives of their kids, of the elderly that live with them. They all have to work together if they're going to maintain their household. And so there were times when I was out there where I had maybe a piece of chicken the size of a quarter with some chicken broth and rice, and that was it. That was my meal. And I had to get used to that. I had to get used to not having access to an actual bathroom. And I mean, that's okay, but when there's bugs that are attacking you from every direction, it gets a little difficult. Um, and it was really a beautiful experience. I remember when I first went out there, I was playing football or soccer with some of the kids out there, and I heard this really loud squawk. And I look up, and I'm looking around trying to figure out where the sound's coming from, and I see these two emerald green macaws that flew and landed and perched in a palm tree behind me. And then I hear it again, and I see a dozen of them flying right over my head. And that is one of the things that blew my mind. Until then, I had only ever seen them in a pet store or at somebody's house or in a zoo. But to go deep enough into the jungle where you see where they come from, you see them living in their natural habitat. It was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen in my life. So, um, there was one time as well when I was on the river, and we stayed at this community that was in a kind of sketchy area, um, and this was on my way back from the jungle, and or heading out, and it was a hostel. They had a hostel there. They had a little restaurant, but we were in an area where they were doing a lot of drug trafficking, and it was dangerous. But we didn't have any choice. It was either there or sleep on the river, which is equally dangerous. And I remember walking through this little community, and there was men all over the place just staring at me while I'm carrying this huge bulky bag. And I'm thinking I'm gonna die. Never gonna hear about me again. So, but it worked out. I ended up getting bed bugs really bad, but I survived. So, with that being said, I will show you El Rio Abujao. Yeah, we basically lived on the boat. That was the day I saw the macaws.
No, che re.
This is where I was with Ministry of Agriculture, and we were mapping out the
Ya
borders
listo.
of their land.
Va a
in
venir
San
ya tu
Mateo.
hijo, nosotros. Después quieta, vas a limpiar así. Vas a poner una plancha acá en medio. O sea, mayormente.
And this is where I was working with them, again, on taking soil samples. They were doing this in order to find out what they could. Those are all bugs inside. The guy up there who's in front of the boat, he's the guide. He's the one who's watching out for logs or whatever might be in the river. And this boat was barely held together. We crashed into a hole in the tree, and a log exploded. The termites went all over the boat, so it was fun. Yes, there's coconuts in the jungle.
Que-
This is where they were speaking with the community, talking about the plan that they had with them. Okay. Los Ríos Tapiche y Blanco. This is the second major trip that I went on. This is where I spent a little more than 3 weeks in the Amazon. This was the big one. Um, I usually keep good track or keep in touch with my family while I'm gone. And I remember telling my mother before I went out to the jungle, I'm not going to be able to talk for close to a month. And she said, well, how am I going to know that you're okay? And I said, well, as long as you don't see me on the news, you're good. So um, it it was a big one. Um, yeah, it was 20 hours from Requena, which Requena is, it's in the northeastern part of Peru. And we traveled to Capanawa. So as I was saying, there's little opportunity for work, so the jungle is exploited. And so with Kapanawa, we were working with them because they wanted to practice selective harvesting. So we were going out there to show them a healthy way of maintaining the forest without destroying it. And so we had the members of our team that all went out there. I was doing the documentary work. We had people that specialize in forestry, other people who were biologists, whatever it may be. And we all went out there to work as a team. And that's one thing that I really learned when I went out there is how important it is to trust the people you travel with. There were many times where we had issues on this adventure that we went out there. One of the ones was there was one night while we were traveling, and these logs that these people exploit. I knew it was happening, but I didn't know how they transport them. Well, they do it the same way that they did 130 years ago here. They send them down the river. And so what they do is they get these logs that are massive. They cut them in 12 to 14 foot sections, and they have these huge staples that they will pound into these logs and have a metal cable that will connect all of them, and they ride them all the way to the nearest city. So it might take them a month and a half, but I was blown away because as we're traveling, this river is much bigger than the first river I went on, so it was more accessible for these logs. So as we were traveling, we would see these logs that had, they were huge. Some of them were as big as this room, these rafts, as big as this room. And there would be man camps on top of these rafts. Guys that had their boats that would be pulled up on top of there, they had a tent, they had a little kettle and a fire going, and it just blew my mind to see that. Like, I'm thinking, how can you live out there on the river? But that's what they did. They had to protect their wood so people wouldn't steal it. And the boats out there, they're really cool. They're called peques, and they're made from a single tree. They'll get this tree and they'll get their axe and they will hollow it out. And they're very, very light, and they sit just a few inches into the water, so they can glide right over all of that deadfall. And so that's what I traveled on for some of the time that I was gone. And the motor is really interesting. It's not like an outboard motor where it sits a few feet into the water. They're long, and the propeller is pointing out, and the handle, I suppose from the motor, the engine is pointing up. And it's on like a little pivot so they can pop it up out of the water. So the motor only sits maybe 8 inches below the surface, and so whenever they see a tree coming, they pop up the motor and they glide right over it and then put it back in. This is how they get around. This is how they hunt. This is how they transport everything. So there's these men that will go out into the Amazon, and they don't hunt just on the river. The river floods a lot, and it will disappear into the forest. So men will go through the jungle on these peques and hunt. One man that I met at the community in Kapanawa, he was one of the leaders of the community, and he's who I stayed with, but I'd see him every other night take off, and he would bring his machete, a gun, a spear, and his paddle. and take off on the boat, and he would be gone as long as he needed to be to get food for his family. And so that was something where I realized how much of a foreigner I actually was. I went out there with my huge 70-liter REI hiking backpack, my water filter. I had like bug spray. I had all this stuff. And I went on one trip with these men where we were supposed to be gone overnight, and this guy just brought a machete. Machete and a gun, nothing else. And they were laughing at me because I was struggling so much, because the jungle is not flat. It goes up and down, up and down. And here I am falling and struggling. And they'll be gone anywhere when they go hunting from 3 hours up until like to a week. Whatever they need to do to provide for their family. This is where I discovered some of the dangers of the Amazon. I learned about the jaguars. I learned about the anacondas. The jaguars, I didn't see any, but I guess you usually don't see them. Um, but they do attack people sometimes. And I felt bad when I went out there because I would see people who had killed jaguars, but they told me if you don't kill the jaguar when it sees you, it could very well kill you. And they have to do that to protect themselves. And because if they die, if and typically out in these communities, it's the father who does the hunting and the mother will stay home with the children. If the father dies, the mother will have no one to take care of her. And so that's why they do that. When we were out there, we worked with selective harvesting and a fruit called awaje. The selective harvesting really bothered me a lot, but it was necessary. So in this video that I'm going to show you, it does show a family, or show a group of men chopping down a massive tree. That really bothered me because I went out to the jungle thinking, yeah, I'm going to save the Amazon. And then I'm out there filming them chop down this massive tree. However, I did learn when I was out there that like these people, they can't go to Home Depot to buy their wood. If they want to build a house, they have to chop down the tree, cut up the boards, travel 2 days to get the nails, or use vines to wrap them together, and that is what they have for their house. And so one tree, I mean it's a big tree, can provide for a lot of families. And so that's one of the things that I had to film. Also, there is a video in here of a man cutting up a wild boar. It is dead, so I just wanted to give you a heads up for those of you who it might bother, but there's an animal in there. Some of the difficulties that I ran into were the insects, as well as the food and potable water. I didn't have a lot of food. When there was food, food that was abundant, we ate. For water, I tried to keep myself, I brought a water filter out there, but it eventually got to a point where I couldn't filter my water. We would be out hiking for 8-10 hours, and the men out when they were out there, if they wanted water and we crossed the stream, they just dip their hand down, drink, keep going. I'm like, wait, hold on guys. I need like 10 minutes to try and filter my water. And I'm like, no. So they showed me parts of the stream where you could drink. So yes, I drank the water. And I survived. And the insects were bad. a lot of my coworkers had dealt with much more than I had. A lot of them had, I don't know if you know what botflies are, but it's a fly that will lay an egg in your skin, and a big worm will develop, and then it'll crawl out. Almost every one of those guys had one. Or they have had, what was it? I think they had yellow fever as well, or malaria. So I consider myself pretty lucky that nothing happened to me. But I knew it was a risk when I went out there. It really wasn't what I expected. I'll tell you one story that really bothered me, but it was a good learning experience for me. I was, on the same day that we were cutting up this wild boar, there was this father who came in. He had this beautiful turtle that he found in the jungle. And I had remembered learning about this turtle while I was gone, in this book I was reading, and it's endangered. And it was huge. It must have been 20, 25 years old. And I asked them what was going to happen with it, and they said, oh, we're going to eat it. And I'm thinking in my mind, what? You can't eat this turtle. This thing it's endangered. But I couldn't tell that to this guy, because this is the food he has for his kids. If his kids don't eat this turtle, they might not have food for a couple days. And it was big enough that it could help them. It would really help them. And so I just had to bite my tongue, say, okay, it's not my place to tell you you can't do that. It's not my place to tell you you can't chop down that tree to build your home. So that was a bit of an eye-opening experience for me. I had to learn how to kind of rewire my thought process and be accepting of what it was that they were doing. Becoming accepted, that was something that it took some time. The people out in the Amazon tend to not trust anyone who doesn't live with them. It takes time. And so it took time with really getting to know these people. I spent a lot of time fishing with them. I played volleyball. They did have a volleyball net, so I played almost every day. Um, and, oh, also Masato. I will tell you what Masato is. Maybe some of you have heard of chicha in Ecuador, but it is an alcoholic drink that they produce using yuca. So they get the yuca, it's like a big jungle potato. They boil it, they mash it up, and then, in part of the process, they'll put it in their mouth, chew on it, and spit everything in there back in. And there's something in the saliva that will help the fermentation process. And so, for my first time out in the jungle, I was like, nah, I'm not going to drink the Masato. And then after a while, there's this man who's making it, and he invited me to come in and learn how to do it, and I said, okay. And so really, it's no different than going to someone's house and them saying, like, here's a glass of wine, and you say, no, I'm not going to drink it. They're proud of it. It's part of their culture. So I needed to detach myself from what was really important, what I had known and grown up with, and being accepting entirely of their lifestyle. I was laughing because the boat was sinking. I was too big for it.
Tanto te cuidado, ¿eh?
That was my favorite part. And this is where we were working with the community, teaching them how to use
Hay
chainsaws.
bastante motocerrito y hay maderero que dicen que vas a estar por de tu computador piezas sinceramente. Si puedes, ¿sabes? Bien.
This really bothered me a lot.
Pon,
Agáchate.
This is a board that they needed to make for the house. That's how they cut it. This was a moment that I learned how to make a roof for a house. It's made from plants that they take out in the jungle, and each roof that they make will be good for 6 to 7 years of watertight. And some of the members of the community were shocked when I went over there and I started making it. Like, one of the elders taught me how to make it, and then I got on my knees and I started doing it, and they were just blown away that this crazy guy from the US is like wanting to learn. Those are some of the logs that are taken illegally. And this is Noel. He's one of the boys that I met when I went fishing, and his uncle is the one who taught me how to make the roof. So they're a family I really connected with when I was in the jungle. They took me fishing, and I was surprised because I couldn't see any fishing line. And I'm like, how are you going to get the fish? And then I learned. So this is not in the river. The river flooded, so we were actually paddling through a part of the forest that flooded. And then I found out how to catch the fish. I still had my fishing line. Sí. Hola. And it's so funny because you go to these houses and like here people have like goats and chickens and dogs and cats. They have parrots and monkeys that just live all over the house. And we went back.
Ôi, ôi. Ôi, mình nổi.
Wow!
Tú quieres comerlo sin por, tienes que comer de arriba. Y arriba te cuesta 30, 40 minutos.
Pues enséñeme cómo hacerlo, como muy duro. ¿Duro? ¿Una mano, dos manos?
Con dos manos. Y le embocas, le mascas.
¿Sí?
Dale, le haces. Fuerza, ¿sí?
¿Y a masticar? Masticar.
Hasta que se haga bien aguadito.
¿Sí?
Y sigue hasta que se haga medio aguado.
¿Sí? Pues en la boca.
Ajá, ya, listo. Ahí va.
Eso es.
Ya,
¿Sí?
No poquito, no poquito.
Like when it's done.
Mira, mira, basta, querido. No, eso duele, eso duele.
Lágrimas de los mamitas llorando.
We were working with and how to take root trees. Until that moment, they had chopped down the trees to take root, but it's really difficult to obtain. So we brought these climbers, like these harnesses that they could use to climb these trees, and taught them how to take it. So and how they can return to these places every 8 months to a year to get new fruit. So that's about 80 feet up. And those bushels are
Salud.
You can use it to make juice and ice cream and all kinds of great stuff.
Aguaje.
That was my tent, kind of falling apart. That's after 3 weeks in the jungle. Whoa! This was the day we got our boat stuck in the river. A tree had fallen and laid itself across the entire river. And we couldn't get the boat over it with all of us in there, so we had to get out and push. And it was over my head, so that was kind of... These are some of the rafts I was telling you about. Some of them are abandoned at times, and we actually hit one with their boat in the middle of the night. And the boat went entirely up on top of this raft, so we had to get out, stand on the raft, and try and lift the boat I pushed the raft down enough to get it off, and it wasn't a good moment. It's pretty dangerous, actually. And these houses are floating on balsa rafts. This is heading back to Requena, one of the main cities that out in the Amazon. Okay, so some of what I learned. There's a lot of things that you won't learn in books. You won't learn on documentaries, and a lot of things that the people keep to themselves. Once you go out there and start spending time with the people, they will start opening up to you. And it took about a week and a half for me. Once I started drinking the Masato and playing volleyball and helping out with chores that the people had, they started inviting me to do things with them. And it really is no different than if you have new neighbors come in, or you go somewhere new, and the more that you participate and interact with the people, they will open up to you. Yes, there are giant snakes out there. I'm sure a lot of you were wondering that. I didn't see any myself, but I did interview some of the hunters, and they told me about anacondas that they came across that were as big as logs, like as wide as them. And they do eat people, but as long as you're safe, you'll be okay. I learned a lot about potable water. You can find it in some of the plants. It exists in the vines, it exists in the bamboo. You can get the bamboo and chop it in sections and slice up one of the top halves and just pour the water into your mouth, and it's all very fresh. Don't take any modern amenities for granted, because there are people in other parts of the world that everything that they have to make. And that is one of the biggest things I learned, and that I returned to the US grateful for, is having that, especially the potable water. I mean, yeah, the river water tasted fine, but it's not something that I would recommend doing. And if they're, okay, I did learn about something called the Chuyachaki. I don't have a whole lot of time to go into it, but I'll give you a briefing of it. So in the Amazon, one thing that I learned is that here we have so much control of our environment. Once you go to another part of the world where there's not a lot of people that exist, you are not above it. And that's something that my boss told me, who got lost in the jungle for 8 months and lived. But you cannot control the jungle. And the Chuyachaki, and also things that we feel like we have a good understanding of here, it's not that way always in other parts of the world. Things that we know are real. So the further that you travel into the jungle, you start hearing about shamanism. You start hearing about these giant snakes or these spirits that live in the jungle, and you're like, that's not real. But then you start hearing about all these people who experienced it and are talking to you about it, and then you start questioning, well, maybe there are snakes that big. The Chuyachaki is a spirit that lives in the Amazon that I was told about. It's kind of a legend, but people claim that they've met him, and what he does is it helps defend the Amazon. So when people go out to the jungle and they are maybe going out there with the wrong intentions, this spirit will take the form of anything. It could be a person, it could be an animal, and they try and lead you deeper and deeper into the jungle, and then they disappear. And then you're trapped out there. Let's see. I'll tab through some of the pictures real quick. I'm sorry I can't spend more time on it, but you can kind of see a little bit of what I just showed you on the video. That is one shot I was pretty proud of. I didn't touch it up or anything. It was a 13-second exposure. That was me filtering the water. My little home. The kitchen. Okay, so what am I working on doing now? Well, I want to become, I've been still working with Celia, and I want to become a bridge between the two worlds and find a way to help people get involved. People in other parts of the world who want to participate, who want to help the jungle. So, and the people who live there. So they're currently working in ecotourism right now, and that's something that I'm in the process of getting developed here. So I promise if any of you want to go out and see the jungle, it's a safe area. They won't bring you out to the areas where there's cocaine trafficking or anything. And also, they do a lot with handmade goods, and I'm looking at doing some potential documentary work down there again. So if any of you are interested in potentially participating, or you just want to know, because I'm not done working with them. I'm not done with my work in the Amazon. And my goal, as I mentioned, is trying to develop ways for people in other parts of the world to help. And not just to help, to learn about it, to take something out of it and give it and to give back. So if you want, I have a notebook up here. You can put your name, some contact info, and what you're interested in. And once I start getting rolling, I will contact you. With regardless of whatever it may be. If you just want to learn about the jungle, if you want to hear some of the stories I have. And so yeah, I just want this, I'm doing this because it could potentially provide opportunities for the indigenous communities down there. So they won't have to exploit the jungle. They can work with producing traditional clothing and maybe selling that in the US or whatever it may be. It could be cultural tourism. But I want to try and do this so it can help protect the jungle. Because if this works, if it happens, it could help save the lives, the lives, but also protect vast quantities of Amazon. And also, I really want to help teach people about this because it's beautiful. There's not too many places in the world where you can see butterflies that are bigger than your hands, like put together. Or about these, I don't know, about sea jaguars or macaws. It really is a treasure and something that if it's going to be protected, we need to work together. That's my contact info. If you want to read some of my story, I do have it online. It's not all on there yet, but that's my blog, the top one. My email is the second one, and if you want to look up a little bit on Sadia, there is their information right at the bottom. So with that being said, is there any questions? Are there any questions? Any at all? Yes, ma'am. Yes, yes. They speak Spanish as well as their indigenous language. Okay. Mike? Yes. Okay. That's something that I wasn't able to really elaborate on. Yes, where I was, there were clothing most of the time. There was a lot, the uncontacted tribes, I was close to them, but it's not permitted to see them because you can get them sick. So the communities that I was with, they spoke Spanish, they wore clothing, they went to the city from time to time. So, yeah. Okay. Anybody else? I know that some of the students here have to take off. I had several dry sacks, and I had a waterproof case for my camera, and then I had a big North Face like duffel bag that was basically waterproof. So I kept everything in there when I was in a lot of really damp areas or traveling on the boat. Yeah, I brought a computer along and an external hard drive, so I would sit in my tent and transfer all the material to that hard drive. So, yes. To protect myself against the bugs, I did bring bug spray out there. I do know there are plants out there that you can rub on your skin. A lot of natural remedies for sores, for whatever it might be, but that's what I did. I was out there for a total of around 5 weeks between my two trips. The second one was the longest one. It was about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. Yes. I brought a solar charger. However, a lot of the Peruvian government does a really good job of taking care of the communities out there. They actually installed solar chargers for these people. And so the houses, a lot of them had light until maybe 9 o'clock at night, and then they shut them down. So, yeah, yeah. I was the only one. And that was the first time I'd ever gone out into the jungle without anybody that was either from Europe or an English-speaking country. I'm sorry, not country, but where they spoke English at all. So it was different. I know for some of the community members out there, they were scared of me. Like, the little kids had never seen somebody so tall or somebody who looked like me. And so that was a little different as well. So, yeah, I remember specifically some little kids like seeing me and screaming and taking off running because they like, I spoke a different language, my accent was different, but I mean, the more that I was around them, it was fine. So, yes. I know they didn't force it on them. A lot of these people, I do know they wanted to do that. They wanted to find a way to earn some income, and it's a very hard lifestyle. Like even for the people who are doing the illegal harvesting, there's kids who are 16 years old, and they leave, and they're gone for months and months and months, risking their lives every day to try and get this wood to these families. Or I'm sorry, to get processed. And um, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering if there's any major companies that go out there and take advantage of these indigenous communities. Absolutely. So that's why they try and get these property titles out there. And also, and for these communities, what they do is they go out there and they say, okay, well, we're going to chop down this portion of your forest and we will pay you. And so it sounds pretty good. And then they say, okay, well, we're going to have you guys work with us too. And they're like, okay. And then afterwards, they find out that that they charge them for their gasoline. They charge them for using their tools to harvest the forest. So these indigenous communities actually come out in debt. So Celia tries to bring all these people together. And something that I don't have in here is a meeting that I had with various tribes and communities from the Amazon that all came together. Some of them came with their traditional clothing. Some had, like the Matses, they live in eastern Peru. And it was up until around 20 years ago that they were still killing people then. Like foreigners would come in and they'd kill them because they were trying to keep people out. Now they're working with people. And they're realizing, okay, well, if we work in ecotourism and we all work together, we can make this happen. So they are all coming together. And that's what Celia has done. They're like the middleman between the Peruvian government and the indigenous people. So, yeah, anybody? I'm not sure. It's so big. It's really, um, yeah, it's overwhelming just how big it is and what lives there, and so much of what you don't know that it still exists there. There's so many uncontacted tribes out there, and like I've never seen them, but I've heard a lot about them. So they're trying their absolute best to keep that safe.